Bello! Today we're going to talk about bigger reactors. Before we start, let's get a few things out of the way. This video is about 3 different mods for different versions of Minecraft: big reactors, bigger reactors, and extreme reactors. Just to make everything a bit simpler, if you're looking at this texture, or even this old texture, the first half of the video is for you. And if you're seeing this texture, then the second half of the video is for you. Also, we're only going to talk about passively cooled reactors, so I'm sorry, no turbines. This is the smallest sized reactor that you can make, meaning that it only has one fuel rod. If we turn it on, it's going to produce us a max amount of 864 RF at a cost of 0.279 millibuckets of fuel. So if we want to measure its efficiency, it's around 3%. We all know that adding coolants to the reactor is going to affect the efficiency. Here I have surrounded the fuel rod with blocks of diamond, and you might notice the efficiency just got increased to almost 10%. Even though air is also considered to be a coolant, using it is the worst decision that you can make, because this reactor has an efficiency of 1.5%, worse than the smallest one that you can make. In order to understand why coolant is going to affect the efficiency, we have to understand how power is being generated inside a big reactor. When the fuel rod has fuel in it, it's going to be irradiated. That radiation is going to travel to adjacent blocks, it's going to be absorbed, and the absorbed radiation is going to cause heat. Once the heat reaches the reactor casing, you get some power. So having more space with more coolant is going to increase the absorption, meaning that you're going to get more heat for the casing. So how do we place down the coolant? The wiki tells you that radiation only travels in cardinal directions, so this should be optimal, and this one should be totally invalid. On a very small scale, you will not notice the difference, but on a bigger scale, you will. The reactor which only has coolants on the cardinal directions will only have an efficiency of 14%, while the other reactor, which is full of coolants, has an efficiency of 15%. Long story short, if you have a reactor, just fill it in with coolants. The wiki also tells you that radiation can travel only 4 blocks. This is 5 blocks, and that will cause the reactor to have an efficiency of 16.09%. If you increase it by one more ring, it's going to be 16.16%. If you switch it with ludocrite blocks in this version, it's going to be 16.34%, and if you go for this ridiculous design, it's going to be 16.56%. So with better coolants and more coolants, we're increasing the efficiency at a very garbage rate. Why are we improving the efficiency at very garbage increments? Well, that is because in order to understand the basics, we are only playing around with one variable, and that is the coolant. However, there is a far more important variable, and that is reactivity. Every single reactor that we have tested so far only has one fuel rod, so the reactivity rate for them is just going to be 100%. But whenever you have 2 fuel rods near each other, the reactivity is going to increase. The radiation, which is eventually going to be converted into heat and then power, can also activate other fuel rods. That is going to irradiate the next fuel rod, so it's going to be more fuel efficient. At a certain distance, fuel rods are no longer going to affect each other with radiation, so if we turn this reactor on, fuel consumption is exactly doubled, and RF production is also doubled, because they're not affecting each other. But if they're touching, fuel consumption is actually quite less, and our efficiency is at almost 40%. So in this setup, it's like having 2 very small reactors. In this setup, we're increasing the efficiency by a lot. This is also around 3%. However, let's move to the big question: checkerboard pattern or everything in the center? From now on, I'm going to include all the numbers that I use for calculations so that you can also see. In these reactors that you see in front of you, we exactly have 9 fuel rods, 9 control rods, and exactly the same amount of coolant. The only difference between them is their configuration. So if we turn on the reactor, which everything is in the center, our efficiency is going to be around 20%. The checkerboard pattern, however, is going to increase our efficiency to 29.49%. That is because the reactivity in this one has been increased from 240% to 270%. This other reactor that you see over here is a teeny tiny bit different. Instead of 4 coolants in the center, we have 4 moderators in the form of graphite. A block of graphite is going to increase the reactivity between 2 fuel rods, and it's most optimal if you use it in the center like this. So in the corners like so, that's not very good. It's just better to have a coolant. Again, in very small reactors, the difference is not very noticeable, but if we turn this one on, our efficiency is going to be around 29.70%. And also, just to show you what I mean, that this is the optimal position for a graphite block in between 4 fuel rods, we have 2 more reactors. All of them have 5 fuel rods, but this one is full of coolants, this one has 4 graphite blocks, but not in the center. The one with the coolant is going to be 32% efficient, and the one with graphite blocks is going to be 31.4% efficient. And I also think that this is a good time to mention this, but every single reactor in every single modpack and in every single version has different RF output and fuel consumption. So in something like Project Ozone, instead of getting 20,000 RF, this will give you 1 million. So don't pay attention to the numbers, just pay attention to the ratios. Although I would like to admit in some modpacks they also change the ratios, but this is the basics. The other question is, do we go wide or do we go tall? Well, based on everything that I have just mentioned, you know that we should go wide. But just for testing purposes, this reactor has 76 coolants. So I have placed on 76 coolants in this tall reactor, and in this one I just filled it in. So the wide one was 29.49% efficient. The weird one, which you probably never make, is going to be 27.8% efficient. And this one, which is a bit more logical and has more coolants, is going to be 27.98% efficient. So yeah, wider ones are way more efficient. So that was literally all the basics. How do we proceed? To the good ones. In front of you, we have 3 reactors. All of them have 13 fuel rods. The difference between them is that the first one is just blocks of diamonds as coolant. The second one is blocks of diamonds with 1 row of resonant ender, and I missed a block. But the third one has a ring of resonant ender, is full of diamonds, but also has graphite. You know, literally in the center. 4 of them. And all of these reactors are 15 by 15. Let's compare the efficiency and see which one is the best. It's obviously that one, but we have to start somewhere. Let's turn on the reactor and compare their efficiencies. I added 1 more reactor as well. Everything is in the center, but it also has more fuel rods. So the first one has an efficiency of 29.2%. Then with resonant ender we go to 29.3. With resonant ender and graphite we go to 29.6. And the final one is just at 12%. With the same amount of fuel rods, it's at 22%. So with resonant ender and graphite, that seems to be your best bet. The reason that resonant ender is having an effect is that different coolants have different absorption ratios. So for example, a block of diamond, a block of ludocrite, a block of meat, oldemodium, unobtainium, etc. are going to absorb most of the radiation. However, resonant ender is going to take the weak radiation and transfer it to the wall. This is why it does have an impact. Another thing that you might notice is that those guys are 30% efficient. However, this guy with just 2 fuel rods is 40% efficient. That is because the bigger you go, the heat is going to increase, and at 2000 degrees, well, it's going to affect the efficiency by a lot. Therefore, it's going to be way better to have way more smaller reactors than a massive giant one. Also, it's going to be way better for lag purposes because all of the reactors that I have made so far are within one chunk. These are multi-blocks in modded Minecraft, and if they cross chunk boundaries, they're going to cause a lot of TPS lag. Now it is time for extreme reactors from 1.21. Right at the start, you might notice that the smallest reactor possible has an efficiency of almost 9%. And this is why I actually told you don't pay attention to the numbers, just pay attention to the ratios and determine which reactor is going to be more efficient for you in its own category, because they are different versions. So if you want to compare the 2 mods together, either divide these numbers by 3 or the bigger reactors should be multiplied by 3. This mod is also more or less the same as bigger reactors, however there are a few differences. Radiation only travels in cardinal directions, so both of these reactors are going to generate us 388 RF per tick, at the same fuel consumption, depending on the waste available, so you don't really have to fill in the corners. Of course, more coolants are going to make the reactor way more efficient. This one has 12 total coolants and it's generating us 494 RF. This one has 20 and it's generating us 514 RF, and the one with 28 coolants is giving us 515. So it's negligible. Also, better coolants like indium are going to affect the efficiency, but again marginally, we're getting 528 RF per tick. Another difference between the 2 mods is the checkerboard pattern and everything in the center. The wiki tells you to go with a checkerboard pattern, but with equal fuel rods, everything in the center gives you 4860 RF per tick, and the fuel burn up is 56. The checkerboard one only gives you 4820 RF at 62 fuel consumption. So yeah, it's significantly worse. At a slightly bigger scale, you can actually notice the difference. 5320 against 5220, but the checkerboard pattern also consumes a teeny tiny bit more fuel. Of course, another huge difference between the bigger reactors mod and the extreme reactors mod is reactivity. Here, even though we have 9 fuel rods, reactivity is at 100%. I have tried my best, it never goes more than 100%. It does drop when you have extra waste. The next question is, do we go wide, do we go tall? Well, the wide one gives us 5320 RF per tick, if you eject the waste. But the tall one with the same amount of fuel rods is going to give us far less. Yeah, it's 4360 at a way more fuel burn rate. This mod is not really meant to have passive reactors. The passive reactors are actually tools in order to get the turbines and get better material. For example, one of the best fuels that you can use inside your reactor is verderium, which is a fluid. And this reactor with almost the same setup and also a better coolant called redfrigium generates 24,000 RF instead of 5,000. Although, look at the burn up rate. But in general, if you want to use a passively cooled reactor in this mod in order to generate power, just go wide, ignore the corners and put everything in the center. And obviously use good coolants. And the best coolants are as follows. One of the best ones you can use is diamonds. If you're filthy rich and crazy, just go with terrasteel. Netherite is better than terrasteel. And the best one is of course redfrigium. And I guess that's all. See you in the next one. Bye bye.